August 14th, 2022 at 2:37 a.m. Trailhead horror true story from Oregon Cascade Mountains missing hiker mystery. You're listening to ASMR 400 for Found. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Okay, so I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to post something like this, but I swear to you, I've been carrying this weight for months, and every night it eats at me like the sound of cicadas in the trees that just won't quit. And the worst part is I know I can't go back there, but the place still feels like it's under my skin. I figured maybe putting it out here would make it lighter, so here goes this. All started in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina at a little pull. Most folks don't even know, as they're the kind of trailhead that isn't on the main ranger maps. Kind where the sign looks like it hasn't been painted since the 70s, and the wood has warped and split so the letters almost look like scratches more than words. I grew up around here, so I thought I knew the trails. I thought I knew the woods, but I swear this one didn't used to be there, not when I was a kid. And not when I came back from college either. It was like it just appeared one summer tucked between two massive rhododendron bushes like it was waiting. My buddy Caleb were looking to kill a Saturday. We had a couple of sandwiches in a cooler, and the kind of cheap beer you drink more for the ritual than the taste, and we figured why not hike a trail we hadn't seen before. I still remember how the air felt wrong, even in the parking lot, heavy like August, even though it was late September. And when I shut the truck door, the echoes seemed to linger too long, like the mountains didn't want to give the sound back. Start of the trail was narrow and angled upward right away. None of that easy flat warm-up you usually get. It was the kind of path that made your calves burn within 10 minutes. And Caleb joked that maybe this was some forgotten moonshiner road carved into the ridge back in the day, and I laughed, but the sound didn't feel right. It got swallowed into the trees like the woods were eating every bit of human noise and leaving only the scrape of our boots and the wheeze of our breath. About a mile in, we noticed something strange. The trees on either side were all bent just slightly toward the trail. Not snapped, not broken, just leaning in like they wanted to look at us. And it wasn't one or two, it was dozens in a row. Like some invisible weight was pulling them down the middle of the path. Caleb stopped and squinted and said, "Do you feel like we're being herded?" I wanted to laugh it off, but my throat felt tight, and I just told them to keep walking. Further we went, the quieter it got. No birds, no squirrels, no woodpeckers, not even a breeze through the leaves. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath, and every step sounded way too loud. I kept glancing behind us, expecting to see someone, but the trail behind us always looked darker, like the shadows piled up the moment we passed. And when I looked ahead, the light felt pale, like it had been drained before it hit the ground. Then came the smell. It was faint at first, like damp earth and rust, but it got stronger the higher we climbed, until it was all I could taste in the back of my throat, like pennies and wet moss mixed together. Caleb muttered that something must have died up ahead, maybe a deer, maybe a bear, and I wanted to believe him. But the stink didn't have that sour rot edge. It was metallic like fresh blood, even though there was no carcass, no flies, nothing, just that thick iron tang hanging over the trail. We came round a switchback, and that's when we saw it wedged between two boulders. It was an old wooden sign, the kind you'd see on a nature path. except the letters had been carved deep by hand, not painted it red welcome home in jagged uneven strokes, and the wood around the letters looked burned like someone had pressed hot nails into it. The edges of the sign were splintered and blackened, and for some reason, there were strands of something thin and pale tangled on it. Looked like hair. Caleb swore under his breath and said, "No way, we're turning back," and I wanted to agree. But when I looked down the path behind us, it didn't look like the same trail anymore. It looked narrower, darker, and I couldn't see the little scrape marks from boots, like we had never come up this way. And Allie told Caleb, "Maybe we just keep going a little further. Maybe there's another trailhead that loops down the other side," but my voice sounded shaky, and even I didn't believe it, and the way the woods pressed in from both sides made me feel like if we stopped too long, the trees would just close over us and we'd never get out. So we pushed forward past that burned sign, past the stink of blood that clung to the back of our tongues, and I swear every step felt like it was taking us farther from the world. We knew like the mountains had tilted and we had slipped into a place that wasn't on any map. That's when the whispering started. The whispering came low at first, so soft it could have been wind. But the thing is, there wasn't any wind. Not a single leaf moved in the canopy above. I could hear it under my boots, till like the dirt itself was humming, and Caleb stopped dead and looked at me with his eyes wide and white, like he wanted me to say I heard nothing. But I couldn't lie, not with that sound curling around us. It wasn't one voice either. It was layered like a dozen people talking all at once, too fast to catch the words, but steady like chanting, and I swear the syllables rolled the same way you feel when you drive across state lines and suddenly the radio catches a station in another language you can't understand, but it still gets inside your head. Tried to joke it off, Caleb saying maybe we were near a campsite, maybe some church group up ahead praying by the fire, but there was no smoke in the air, no glow, no snapping twigs, just that thick metallic smell and the low hiss of voices sliding in and out of each other. And the longer we stood there, the closer it felt like the sound was tightening its grip, like hands closing around our skull. So we kept walking, neither of us saying much, our eyes flicking from tree to tree, waiting for some shape to step out. But the woods stayed empty except for the lean of the trees and the rot of the air, and that whisper growing sharper and quicker, like it was learning our pace, sensing with the rhythm of our boots. About half an hour in, we came across something that made my gut clench. There was a pair of shoes set right in the middle of the trail, not just tossed like trash, but lined up neatly side by side, like somebody had stepped out of them before walking on barefoot. They were old hiking boots, water-stained and torn at the seams, but the laces were still tied perfect loops, like they had been placed there by careful hands. And the dirt ahead of them were prints, not bare human prints, though these were long and narrow with a kind of stretched shape, like the toes that kept going a few inches further. Then they should have each step sunk deep into the soil, like whoever left them was heavy to heavy. Caleb whispered, "Don't touch them," and I didn't need him to tell me twice. We just stepped wide around the boots, but I couldn't help noticing the prints didn't lead off the trail. They just kept on straight, as if whoever walked out of those shoes had kept to the path without once stumbling or turning. Their feet were pointed dead forward with a precision that looked wrong. We picked up speed, both of us sweating even though the air was getting cooler. And that's when we started hearing our names mixed into the whispers, faint at first my own name curling out of the trees like a child's voice, Caleb's name tumbling after it, and we froze. Because there was no one else on that mountain, not at that hour and not that far up. I shouted into the trees, more out of panic than anger, yelling, "Who's there?" And my voice came back split, not like a normal echo, but in pieces, too many echoes. All at once the syllables bouncing back broken and multiplied, until it sounded like a crowd was mocking me from the dark. Hope grabbed my arm hard, enough to hurt, and said, "We have to go back." But when I turned, the trail behind us didn't look real anymore. It was narrower, it was darker, and the dirt looked slick like wet clay, shining in a light I couldn't place, like it was leading down into something instead of back to the truck. And I swear I smelled the ocean for a second, salt and brine thick in my nose. Even though we were hundreds of miles from the coast, we didn't go back. We couldn't. It felt like stepping that way would pull you as under, like walking into water with no bottom. So we pressed on, and the trail bent sharper uphill, the trees thicker, the whispering louder, until it wasn't whispers anymore. It was singing flat and monotone, like 1,000 voices holding one endless note, and my teeth rattled with it like it was inside my bones. Then we came to the clearing. I swear I'll never forget it as long as I live. The trail opened onto a circle of bare earth, perfectly round, no grass, no leaves, just dirt packed hard, and in the center stood a single tree, black as pitch, not bark black, but burned black from root to crown, without ash, without smoke, just standing there charred and wrong. Round its base lay a scatter of things, belts, wallets, hats, all weather, stained and half buried in the dirt like offerings. Scoop took one step into the circle and froze stiff, his face gone pale. I asked what he saw, but he wouldn't answer, just kept staring at the black tree, his lips moving without sound. And I swear I could hear the song shift deeper, angrier, like the voices didn't want me near him. So I grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back, and the second his boot left the edge of that circle, he gasped like he'd been underwater. Harry asked him what the hell happened, and he shook his head, saying, "Nothing, nothing, just let's go." But his eyes wouldn't meet mine, and his hands trembled. I knew he had seen something in that tree, something I hadn't. As when the ground under us trembled, just a faint shiver like a truck rolling by far off. Except we were deep in the mountains, miles from any road, and in that moment the burned tree creaked, though no wind touched it, and from the split in its bark something pale began to push through, like a hand made of smoke and bone reaching out into the clearing. The thing pushing through the crack in that black tree didn't look solid, not at first. It shimmered like fog in the shape of fingers, long, thin, and bent in ways that made my stomach twist. As it slid further out, it thickened like smoke, hardening into bone, but the bone wasn't right. It was too smooth and too white, like polished shell. And the tips of the fingers ended in points, not nails, just points like sharpened chalk. The smell of iron hit stronger than ever, so heavy I gagged and wiped my mouth on my sleeve. Caleb backed up fast, nearly tripping over one of the belts in the dirt, and he whispered to me not to move, not to breathe, just stay still, like we were kids again, hiding from something in the dark. But I couldn't help it. The ground beneath my boots pulsed like a heart, and I felt it through the soles, each thumb slow and deep and wrong. And I swear it was was timed with the way those pale fingers flexed out of the tree. Then we heard it. The voices weren't singing anymore. They were laughing, not loud, not sharp, but soft like 1,000 chuckles. Buried under the soil, muffled, but all around us, and it made my skin crawl. Because the laughter wasn't coming from the air, it was rising up from below our feet as the mountain itself was holding something just under the surface, and it was amused. We had wandered in, he wanted to run. I swear every nerve in my body screamed at me to bolt down the trail, but when I turned my head, the path behind us had vanished. It wasn't shadows anymore, it was gone, replaced by a wall of trees packed to close together trunks, bending into each other like they had grown there in seconds, and there was no way through, not even a gap wide enough for light. And when I looked forward, the only path left was through the clearing past that blackened tree. Caleb started muttering again, his lips moving too fast for words to make sense. I grabbed his shoulder, but he shook me off with a strength I didn't know he had, and he stepped toward the tree again, and I swear to you, the hand coming out of that split open wide, like it was reaching for him, and I knew if he touched it, he wouldn't come back. So I did the only thing I could think of. I shouted his name loud, enough to tear my throat, and for 1 second the laughter under the ground stopped dead silent. Like the whole forest froze, and Caleb blinked hard like he had just woken from a dream, and staggered backward, his boot landing on one of the wallets, half buried in the dirt. And when he stumbled, the wallet flipped open, and a faded driver's license stared up at us. Photo was sun-bleached and worn, but the face on it looked young, maybe 20, maybe less, and the name was half scratched away. But I could still make out the county seal from our state. I knew this wasn't just trash from some old hiker. These were people, real people, who had walked this same trail and never come out. Caleb saw it too, and he swore and dropped the wallet like it had burned him. And that was when the hand pushed further out of the tree. Just fingers now, but a whole arm, pale and long and slick with something dark that dripped onto the dirt below and hissed when it touched the ground like hot grease in a pan. Smell turned so thick I could hardly breathe, and the circle of earth around the tree began to sink, just a little, like the ground was loosening like wet sand under the tide. I felt that pull in my gut telling me if we didn't move, we'd be swallowed with everything else who bolted. Then no plan, no sense of where the trail even led, just sprinting across the edge of the clearing. Back slamming against our backs, our boots slipping in the dirt, and behind us I could hear the tearing sound of wood splitting wide, the sound of something enormous forcing its way out of a place it had been locked in too long. And over it all came the voices rising into a howl, a single endless cry that echoed inside my chest like it was trying to shake my ribs apart. The path ahead bent hard to the right, into a cut between two boulders, and we dove through it, not daring to look back. And on the other side the air changed sharp and cold, like stepping into a cave in the light. Dim, so sudden it felt like dusk had fallen in seconds, and the whispers returned softer now, but closer, right against our ears, as though whatever had been behind us was no longer behind at all. Slowed only when the trail narrowed so tight we had to move single file, the rock walls slick with moisture pressing in close, and the dirt under our boots turning black and damp. And in the darkness I realized We weren't climbing anymore. The path was leading us down into the mountain deeper. Every step and the thought hit me heavy and clear. Weren't heading out of the woods at all. We were being taken further in. The trail closed in around us tighter with each step, the rock walls squeezing like the ribs of some great animal we had been swallowed into, and every drip of water from the ceiling echoed sharp and hollow like the whole place was hollow bone. I could feel my breath bouncing back off the stone in front of me, like the mountain was tasting it. Caleb kept muttering low under his breath words that didn't sound like English, not even like any prayer I'd ever heard. They came out broken and fast, and I wanted to shake him, but the air was so heavy I couldn't make my voice rise above a whisper. I just kept my hand against the wall, slick and cold, trying to anchor myself to something real, but the rock pulsed faint like the beat of a vein, and I pulled my hand back quick, wiping it on my jeans. Even though the dam stayed like it had seeped under my skin, further down we went the less. It smelled like blood and rust, and the more it smelled like something old, not rot, not mold, but ancient, like the dust of a cellar that hasn't been opened in centuries, thick with secrets and the taste of stone, and it made my tongue feel numb, and I could see my breath puff white in the air, even though it wasn't that cold outside. Then we came to a spot where the trail split, one path bending left into a crack so narrow we would have to press sideways to squeeze through, and the other dropping straight down like stairs cut into the earth, though they were jagged, uneven, like they weren't meant for feet, like they had been clawed out by something that dragged itself into the dark. And I swear I heard something moving down that stairwell, a shuffle slow and deliberate like claws against stone, but too far. Wait to see, asked Caleb which way, and he just shook his head, eyes wide, his face slick with sweat. I knew he heard it, so we chose the crack on the left, thinking maybe we could find another way out, but the moment we squeezed through, the walls pressed so close our shoulders scraped raw against the rock, and the whispers that had been behind us now slid ahead, curling out of the darkness like they knew we were going on the other side. The space opened into another chamber, but not a natural one. The walls were smooth like they'd been carved, and the ceiling arched high enough to lose itself in shadow. And all across the stone were marks, cut deep lines and spirals and shapes that made my stomach lurch. They weren't letters, they weren't pictures, they were something in between. Like the mountain itself had been tattooed by a language no one should speak in the center of that chamber sat a pile of stones stacked deliberate like a cairn, but taller than a man, and wrapped tight with ropes of what I thought were vines, until I saw the pale color. The strands frayed and knotted and unmistakably hair, human hair, some long and dark, some short and gray, all twisted together into thick cords binding the stones in place. Caleb gagged and backed against the wall, his hand clamped over his mouth. But I couldn't move, my eyes locked on that cairn, because I swore it was breathing slow and shallow, the way the ropes of hair shifted, not like wind, not like settling weight, but like a chest rising and falling. Then came the sound again, laughter, only closer now, not buried under the dirt, but seeping from the stones themselves, muffled chuckles vibrating through the cairn until the ropes quivered, and I staggered back, bumping into Caleb, who was whispering, "We shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be here," over and over like a broken record, and I couldn't argue, because because my own bones screamed with the same truthful turn to run back through the crack, but it wasn't there anymore. The wall was smooth, seamless, like it had never split open. I pressed my hands against the stone, searching for a seam, but it was solid, cold, and unyielding. And when I turned back, the cairn was different. The top stone had shifted, fallen away like something inside was straining against its bindings, and the voices weren't laughing anymore. They were crying softer, first like a child, then growing louder, higher, until the chamber rang with the wails of dozens of voices, men, women, children, all tangled together, sobbing in one endless chorus. And the ropes of hair stretched and snapped, and I knew if they broke, whatever was inside would not stay contained. Caleb dropped to his knees, hands over his ears, screaming for it to stop, but the cries burrowed deep, like they were coming from inside our skulls, not from the chamber at all. I felt tears burning my eyes, not from sadness, not from fear, but from something pressing against me, something that wanted to hollow me out and use my body like a mask. So I grabbed Caleb by his collar, yanked him to his feet, and dragged him toward the far end of the chamber, where a narrow tunnel gaped low and crooked, and without thinking we dove into it, crawling on hands and knees, the cries chasing us louder with every scrape of our boots, and the air growing thicker, hotter, until it felt like the mountain itself was breathing down our necks. And when we finally crawled out, the tunnel spat us into blackness so deep it swallowed even the sound of our gasps, and I realized there was no trail anymore. No walls, no ceiling, just open dark, stretching forever, like we had left the mountain and stepped into some endless hollow beneath the world where nothing human had ever been meant to go. The dark we crawled into wasn't the kind of dark you get when the sun drops, or when you close your eyes. It was thicker, heavier, alive. It pressed against my skin like wet cloth, clinging to every inch of me, and the sound of our breathing seemed swallowed whole, like even the air didn't want to carry it. Caleb's hand brushed mine in the dark. I could feel how badly he was shaking, and I wanted to tell him it would be all right, but the truth tasted sour on my tongue because I didn't believe it myself. We stumbled forward, blind, stretching our arms into nothing, and the ground beneath us felt different, not stone, not dirt. It had a give to it, like walking on old carpet or dry moss, but softer, as if there were layers below shifting. When we stepped, and the more I moved, the more I realized it wasn't ground at all. It was bodies, or at least shapes of bodies, pressed flat underfoot, thousands, maybe more, just beneath the surface, their outlines rising faint under the skin of the earth like fish brushing underwater. Caleb cried out when his boots sank deep. When he pulled it free, something clung to the laces, pale and wet like a hand that had tried to hold him back, and he kicked it off with a sob, and it melted into the dark before I could see if it was real. Up ahead, a faint glow began to show itself, weak and gray like moonlight under fog, and we stumbled toward it, desperate for anything but this blind hollow. And as we drew closer, the glow revealed itself to be coming from above, hundreds of feet high, where the ceiling of this place arched out of sight. In that ceiling were holes, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, like windows or vents, each one spilling that cold glow like starlight, but not white, not warm. It was the color of ashes, sick pale gray, that made the skin on my arms prickly, and through those holes I swear I saw movement, figures crawling along the edges, peering down at us their limbs bent long and wrong, their heads too large and their eyes reflecting that glow like whetstones, their mouths moving in silence as if they were the ones whispering the words that had chased us down here. Only now I couldn't hear them. I could only see them mouthing over and over like some silent hymn. Ground shifted under us, then rippling outward like the skin of a drum struck from below. I heard a moan rise from underfoot, long and low and full of sorrow, and I realized those bodies under the surface weren't dead. They were alive, pressed into the earth, suffocating forever. And when I looked at Caleb, his face was pale, his lips moving. I leaned in close to hear him, and he was saying, "Don't listen, don't listen, don't listen." Like he knew if we did, we'd join them. We ran toward the glow, even though every step took us deeper, the holes above shifting further out of reach. Like they were moving with us, like the ceiling was alive and didn't want to let us near escape. And finally we came to the center of that hollow where a stone platform rose from the ground, perfectly square, smooth and clean, like no hand had carved it. But it had been grown there waiting, and on that platform stood a door. It wasn't wood, it wasn't stone. It was something in between, dark and slick, like tar, but shaped with edges too sharp to be natural, and carved across its surface were more of those symbols, the spirals and lines that looked like a language trying to remember itself, and the glow from above made them shine faint like embers. Under ash, Caleb staggered toward it, saying, "Maybe this is the way out, maybe this is how we get home." And I wanted to stop him, but part of me wanted it too, because there was nothing else, no trail, no tunnel, just that door standing impossible in the middle of an endless hollow of suffering. And the moment his hand touched the surface, the whispers returned, not faint, not far, but loud, right at our ears, so close I could feel them rattling my teeth. And they weren't just whispers anymore, they were words. These said his name first, then mine, clear as day, and a dozen voices all at once. And then they said, "Welcome home, welcome home, welcome home," until my knees buckled. I dropped to the stone, clutching my head, and the door began to open, not outward, not inward. It unfolded like the world itself, splitting, and behind it wasn't light. It wasn't dark, it was something shifting, like liquid shadow crawling and folding into shapes too fast to follow. And the smell that poured out was older than blood, older than stone. It was the smell of time itself rotting. The second that door cracked open, the figures in the ceiling holes above went mad, clawing, writhing as if they wanted to drop down but couldn't, and their mouths opened wide in silent screams. He tried to pull Caleb back, but the surface of the door clung to him like tar, pulling at his hand, dragging him forward. And he screamed, not in fear but in something else, something closer to joy, and that terrified me worse than anything else, because it wasn't my friend's voice, it was something using his throat. I grabbed his other arm and pulled with everything I had, the whispers crashing louder, so sharp I thought my skull would split. And for a second I I'd drag him back from that black mouth of a door. But then the ground beneath us shivered again, and a crack split across the platform, and the bodies under the surface wailed so loud I felt my ribs shake. And Caleb slipped forward, yanked into that shifting dark, his scream vanishing like it had never been there at Allen. I was alone, and Caleb slipped through that door and vanished like the mountain had swallowed him whole. I fell back on the platform, gasping, my hands burning from where the tar surface had clung to me. My chest heaving in the choking air, and I swear the door shuddered like it was satisfied, like it had been hungry for him all along. I was just a witness left behind to feel it gloat, and for a moment I thought it would close and leave me trapped in that hollow forever with nothing but the moans of the bodies beneath and the writhing shapes above, but instead it stayed cracked open, pulsing faint, like a wound that refused to health. Whispers didn't stop. Either they shifted now softer, like they were coaxing, like a mother calling a child. Inside out of the cold they spoke my name, slow and steady, drawing it out in voices that belonged to people I'd known long ago, my grandfather, my aunt, even my high school coach. Voices that should have been gone long before this night, and it shook me deep in my bones, because for a second I wanted to believe they may step back from the platform. But the ground beneath rippled again, and I felt those pressed bodies writhing under my boots, their fingers brushing up just enough to catch my laces and tug, and I stumbled forward back onto the stone like they wanted me there. Like the only way out was through that door. The glow from the ceiling dimmed, then each hole shrinking until the figures above were barely slits of movement, their eyes gleaming in the last scraps of ash light, and then even that was gone, swallowed into black. I was left with only the door, breathing slow and steady like a beast waiting patient. As Stone A told myself I would not follow Caleb, I told myself I would find another way, but the chamber had no cracks, no tunnels, no trails, only that door. And the longer I stood there, the more the air thickened until every breath felt like sucking tar. And my vision swam and my legs shook, and I realized I couldn't survive here much longer, not in this hollow that was never meant for human lungs. So I did what I swore I wouldn't. I laid my hand against that tar surface again, and the whispers surged louder and colder, and the door yawned wider, splitting itself into jagged edges, and I was pulled through, not falling, not stepping, but being taken like a fish, hooked and dragged into the deep inside. Was not dark, not light, but both at once, shapes folding and stretching around me like a sky turned inside out. Rivers of shadow flowing upward, cliffs of bone rising sideways, and everywhere those symbols carve into the air itself, spirals and lines burning faint, as if the world I had left had been written down wrong, and this was the draft that came before I stumbled across a ground that wasn't ground at all. It shifted with each step, soft like mud, then sharp like glass, then flat like metal, and the whispers here were no longer around me. They were in me, my blood humming with words I didn't know, yet somehow understood, and every beat of my heart echoed them back. Yes, yes, yes. As if I was becoming part of the chorus. Then I saw Caleb. He was ahead of me, standing upright, facing something I couldn't see, his body stiff, his arms outstretched, his head tilted back, and from his mouth poured not breath, not words, but smoke thick and black, curling upward and vanishing into nothing. He didn't turn when I called, he didn't blink. When I touched his shoulder, he just kept pouring out that smoke like he was an empty chimney, and when I pulled harder, his skin was cold, not dead cold, but stone cold like marble left in winter. And then I saw what he was facing, rising out of the shifting horizon, a figure so tall its head was lost in the folds of the sky, its body thin and crooked, its limbs stretching to far bending wrong, each angle sharper than the last, and it moved without moving 1 second. Near 1 second far, and when it leaned down, the folds of shadow pulled apart to show a face, not one face, but many faces stacked and layered, all screaming silently, mouths stretching wide, eyes rolled back, teeth broken and bloody. Stumbled back, dragging Caleb with me, but his feet rooted in place, sunk into the shifting ground like he had grown there, and the figure bent lower, its many mouths curling into one jagged grin. I felt its breath hot and rancid blowing over me, though the air didn't move, and in that moment, I knew this was the thing, the mountain fed, the thing that waited behind the tree, behind the cairn, behind the whispers. It had me now, the ground broke beneath my boots, then splitting wide into a pit of writhing limbs, pale and then clawing upward, pulling at my legs, at my arms, and I screamed for Caleb to move, to help, but he only poured more smoke, his eyes gone white, his voice long since stolen, and the figure above laughed deep and rolling and endless like the sound of boulders tumbling forever down a gorge, and I fell into that pit. Pit swallowed me whole faster than a slip into a river. Pale limbs grabbing at every part of me, cold slick hands with too many joints yanking me down into a press of flesh that wasn't flesh at all. It was like drowning in wax, soft at first, then hardening, so every breath felt stolen, and my mouth filled with the taste of soil and salt. No blood. I tried to kick, tried to claw free, but each movement only sunk me deeper, until the limbs weren't just outside, they were inside. My skin rooting under my nails, wrapping tight around my ribs. I screamed until the sound cut short, because it wasn't air leaving my lungs anymore. It was whispers. They didn't drag me downward forever, though they spit me out into somewhere else, somewhere that wasn't the hollow and wasn't the place of shadows, but something in between. And the worst part was it looked like home. It looked like the trailhead lot. We had parked the old truck, sitting there, dust on the windshield, cooler in the back, sun hanging low like the day had never ended. And for a heartbeat I thought maybe I had dreamt it all, maybe I had tripped, hit my head, and the rest was just fever and panic. But then I saw Caleb standing by the truck, and I knew it wasn't real, because Caleb wasn't right. His back was to me, but his arms hung too long. His shoulders slumped forward in a way no man's shoulders should. When he turned, I saw my own face staring back at me, stretched tight, the eyes too wide, the mouth full of dirt that dribbled down his chin in clumps, and he spoke in my voice, saying, "You brought me here, you brought all of us here." And behind him I saw them dozens, maybe hundreds, people half familiar, half not, their faces half rotted, half shifting like wet paint running in the rain, all of them wearing some part of me. My eyes, my hands, my scars, and they all spoke at once. In one broken chorus, "We're waiting." She stumbled back, shaking my head, telling myself it wasn't real, telling myself it was just a mountain pressing its nightmare into me. But every step I took, the dirt crunched underfoot, the smell of pine filled my nose, and the truck gleamed in the sunlight, too real to deny. And then I looked down and saw the ground wasn't gravel at all. It was skin stretched tight and pale, my boots sinking into it like stepping on a drum, and the skin rippled with every movement, pulsing faint like a heart. I knew the mountain had me. It was showing me what it wanted me to see, while it fed, he turned and ran anyway, bolting past the truck, past the shapes that wore my face past Caleb, who laughed in my own voice, and I charged into the tree line, desperate for anything but the sight of them, and for a moment I was back on the trail, the same narrow path we'd started on, the same bent trees, leaning in the same smell of rust and moss, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I could still find the way down to the lot, but then I realized it wasn't the same, because every tree I passed had faces in the bark, not carved, not drawn, but grown, twisted mouths, open wide eyes, bulging lips stretched in silent screams, and their gazes followed me as I ran, the wood creaking and groaning like it wanted to peel itself open and step into my path, and I pushed harder, lungs burning, heart pounding. But the trail behind me closed each time I glanced back, trees knitting together, sealing the way, until all that existed was the dirt under my boots and the path ahead. And then the voices came again, but not whispers this time. It was clear words, sharp as glass. They said, keep going, keep going, keep going, like a chant urging me forward. I hated that I listened, but there was nothing else to do, so I ran until the trees broke. I stumbled into another clearing. This one wasn't natural either. It was perfect circle again, but not dirt, not stone. It was water black and still, like a mirror laid flat on the ground, reflecting nothing, not the trees, not the sky, not me. And in the center of that water rose a single postwood, rotten and slick with moss, and nailed to it were more of those things: belts, wallets, shoes, each soaked dark and dripping, slow drops rippling across the surface. Though no wind stirred, Edie staggered to the edge, peering down, and for the first time I saw a reflection. It wasn't mine, it wasn't Caleb's. It was a face I didn't know, gaunt and hollow, with eyes black as coal, staring straight up at me. And as I leaned closer, the water rippled, and dozens more faces appeared, layered one over another, all staring, all waiting. And their mouths opened together, and the sound that came out wasn't a word. It was a scream, raw, endless, a scream that split the stillness like lightning. And then the post in the center began to sink, slow, deliberate, dragging all those trinkets down with it into the black water. I realized too late the ground under my boots was soft, was sinking too, and before I could step back, the edge of the water reached for me like it was alive, curling up over my shoes, pulling me in, and the faces in the water smiled. The water swallowed me before I had the chance to breathe, its surface clamping around my chest like a mouth closing tight, and the cold wasn't normal cold. It was biting deep, like knives under the skin, freezing marrow, not flesh. And the deeper I sank, the darker it grew, until even the memory of light seemed false, and I clawed upward. But my arms felt weak, heavy, as if the water wanted me to forget what upheaving mean faces below guided me down, their mouths stretched wide with smiles that weren't human, to many teeth, some sharp, some broken, all gleaming in the dark. And the water throbbed like it had veins, pumping slow currents around me, dragging me lower, until the sound came muffled first, then sharp like thunder under the ocean, a pounding like drums played on stone. And I realized it wasn't drums. It was hearts beating, hearts larger than houses somewhere deep beneath, pulling me closer with every pulse. When I tried to scream, the water didn't fill my lungs, not the way it should have. Instead, it slid into me, thick and oily and alive, curling through my chest, rattling in my throat, and with every pull of breath I didn't drown. I changed, the whispers settling inside me, carving lines across my thoughts. etching words I couldn't understand but felt branded forward shapes moved around me, shadows darting through the water, then long bodies with arms that bent backward, heads to narrow, to wide at once, their eyes glowing faint like lanterns. In the deep they swam circles around me, faster each pass until the water itself spiraled. I was caught in their whirlpool, spinning with them, and through the blur I saw their mouths move in rhythm like they were chanting, like they were teaching me to listen. Spiral pulled me down into a cavern where the water spread wide as a lake. Its center rose an altar carved from black stone, slick with algae bones. Piled around its base, human bones. No animal could leave such jaws, such ribs. And each skull grinned upward, locked in place with vines of hair still knotted to the altar stone. And I knew this was where the mountain fed. This was where the offerings ended, and on that altar lay Caleb, or at least what had been him, his body. Pale, bloated, his chest rising, though he had no breath, his eyes wide open, staring straight at me, even through the water, and he smiled a slow, cracking smile, his lips splitting, as he whispered through the water, though his throat never moved. Your Lateith figures circling me darted closer now, their long hands brushing my arms. My legs pulling me toward the altar, and I fought, but the water clung too heavy, and the whispers in my chest pushed back against my own will, telling me to surrender, telling me I had already joined them the moment I set foot on the trail, and for one awful second, I almost let go, almost drifted into the altar's pulpit. The mountain wasn't done with me. It wasn't ready to claim me, not yet, because the altar split into, cracking down the center, light spilling out, not warm, not clean, but red and raw like a wound ripped open in the earth, and the pull flipped from down to up, dragging me hard, lifting me through the water fast enough my ears rang, and the last thing I saw was Caleb sitting up on the altar, his grin wider than his face, whispering, "Come back." Then the water spat me out onto dirt hard, wet my lungs, heaving my body shivering, and I was back on the trail, except it wasn't the same. The trees leaned closer, the sky overhead blacker than night, though no stars shone, and the ground hissed faint with steam like the earth had been burned. I realized the mountain had spit me back out, not to let me go, but to play again, because path ahead was lined with lanterns, old rusted metal lanterns hanging from branches. Though no flame burned inside, each instead glowed faint with that same ash-gray light I had seen in the ceiling holes, and as I staggered forward, each lantern flickered bright, then dim, whispering my name in different voices. As I passed, some angry, some pleading, some familiar, some not, and I wanted to stop, wanted to listen. But my legs moved on their own down the lantern path, deeper into the forest that bent and writhed like it was Olivia. Then I heard the laughter again, not under me, not around me, but right in my ear, hot breath sliding against my neck, though when I whipped my head back, no one stood behind, and I knew it wasn't something following anymore. It was something inside it. The trail sloped downward, then into another clearing, this one filled not with water, not with stone, but with fire, dozens of small fires burning in perfect circles. On the ground, each flame low, steady, no smoke rising. In the center of every circle sat a figure cross-legged, motionless, their heads bowed, their skin gray like ash, and as I stepped closer, unlifted its face, sight was made dozens of me, each one older, younger, broken, smiling, sobbing, all versions of my face and body sitting silent around the fires, and when they opened their mouths, the sound that poured out wasn't human. It was a howl, high and long and endless, and every flame flared higher, bathing the clearing in a light that burned without heat. And in that light I saw the mountain itself shift, the trees spinning, the ground rising. I knew I hadn't escaped the water at all. I was still sinking just deeper into a place that had no bottom. The faces around those fires stared up at me, every version of me I had ever been, and some I had never known. And the longer I looked, the more I realized they weren't still. Their chests rose and fell with shallow breaths, their fingers twitching on their knees like they were waiting for a signal. And when they opened their mouths wide, the howl that poured out cut through me like steel on bone. It wasn't just noise. It was memory, my memory, every mistake, every secret, every time I'd hurt someone or failed someone, screamed back at me, and my own voice multiplied until it rattled my teeth. I fell to my knees. He tried to cover my ears, but the sound was already inside. In the firelight I saw my younger self, the one with a chipped tooth from falling off a bike, his eyes wide and black and his mouth stretching too far. As he crawled toward me on hands and knees, his skin cracking with heat, though no flame touched him. And he whispered, "You were always meant for this," and his hand reached for mine, and when his skin touched it, burned deep, not outside, but inside, like he was branding. My blood. He tore away, stumbling into another fire circle, and the version sitting there was older, lined with wrinkles, scars across his hands, his eyes hollow like he had been here longer than I could imagine. And he smiled when I looked at him, a smile of resignation, and said, "You'll get used to it." I wanted to scream that I wouldn't, that I'd fight, but the howl swallowed my words, and the fire flared higher, painting shadows that writhed across the clearing, like the trees themselves were laughing. And then I saw Caleb sitting cross-legged in a circle of his own. But he wasn't how I remembered him. He was taller, stretched, his face pale, his mouth too wide, filled with teeth sharp as nails, and his eyes glowed with that same ash-gray light. And the sound he made wasn't a howl, it was a song, low and steady, like a hymn to something that waited deeper in the mountain. When he lifted his head, his smile cracked his skin, tearing at the corners. And he said, "You brought me home." The fires all around flared brighter, the versions of me rising to their feet, their mouths moving in rhythm with Caleb's song. And I stumbled back into the center of the clearing as their circle closed tighter, the heat growing, the air burning my lungs until I coughed black smoke and fell to my hands, the ground trembling like something below was waking to answer. And in that trembling I heard it, the heartbeat again, deeper than before, shaking the soil, shaking the sky. And with each stump the clearing warped, the trees bending closer, the fires rising taller, until the night itself seemed to peel back. And in that tear I saw it, the shape from the hollow, the figure with too many limbs and too many mouths, pressing against the thin skin of the world, pushing through, like it had been waiting for someone to open the way. He screamed at Caleb to stop, begged him to shut his mouth to end the song, but he only sang louder, his voice splitting into 3, then 6, then dozens, until it wasn't Caleb at all anymore. It was a chorus in his body. His skin stretched thin over something else, something that smiled through his eyes and called me brother. The ground split wide beneath the fires, and from the cracks rose more of those pale arms, grasping at the air, clawing at the sky dragging themselves free, and the versions of me around the clearing didn't resist. They welcomed it, stepping into the arms, letting themselves be pulled under, laughing as the firelight died in their eyes, and I realized that was the truth. This was where every path led, not to escape, not to survival, but to surrender, and I was the last one left standing in that clearing of fire and shadow, my heart pounding in rhythm with the mountain, my body trembling with every thump. I knew the choice wasn't mine anymore, the mountain didn't. To ask it never asked, it only took so when. The arms came for me, pale and slick, wrapping around my chest, my neck, my legs, pulling me off my feet. I didn't fight, I couldn't fight. The ground yawned open and the mountain swallowed me with a roar like thunder, and the last thing I saw was Caleb, his grin wide, his teeth sharp, his eyes empty as he whispered again, "Welcome home." The mountain swallowed me whole, and for a while there was no sense of falling, no sense of ground or sky, only the pounding heartbeat that filled everything, and the press of soil tighter than lungs could bear. But I didn't choke, I didn't suffocate, because the mountain wouldn't let me. It held me in its chest like a secret, keeping me alive, just long enough to show me what lived inside it, dark, peeled away, not like curtains, but like flesh torn back, and what stretched out before me was a chamber larger than anything human could imagine, its walls slick with roots that pulsed like veins carrying rivers of black liquid, and in the center of that chamber sat the figure, the one that had haunted every clearing, every whisper, every reflection, its body to many limbs, its faces shifting from stranger to friend to family to me, its mouth wide enough to swallow the sky, and in that mouth were all the voices I had ever known, screaming, whispering, laughing, all at once. It reached for me with arms longer than trees, and when its fingers touched my chest, they didn't break me. They opened me like paper, peeling my skin until my ribs were bare. Inside I saw not blood, not organs, but fire, the same fire that had burned in those circles. Above it, it spoke without speaking, saying, "You are mine, you always were, you always will be." I knew it was true because the mountain had been calling me since the first time I set foot on its trail, the first time I let my boots touch its dirt. I had been chosen long before I understood. The chamber walls pulsed faster, the heartbeat rising, until it rattled every bone in my body, and the ground split under the figure, showing rivers of faces rushing like water, screaming up at me, hundreds, thousands, maybe every hiker who had ever gone missing, every soul that had stumbled. They shouldn't, all flowing into the mouth of the thing that was both the mountain and more than a mountain, and I knew this was the end of maybe the mountain wasn't cruel in the way people are. It didn't end me, it remade me. It poured its whispers into the fire inside my chest. It stretched my arms, my skin. It pulled my face into new shapes until I saw myself mirrored on its limbs, another face in its endless collection, and in that moment I understood the truth. The mountain wasn't a place. It was a hunger, and we weren't victims. We were parts, pieces, fuel for something that needed to keep breathing. For a fairy should have screamed, but no. Sound came because the scream was already happening in every voice around me, in every face that howled in the dark, and instead I laughed, a broken laugh that wasn't mine anymore. And the sound echoed through the chamber until the walls shook, and the heartbeat slowed, sat his feet, and then I woke up back at the trailhead parking lot, took sitting where we left it, the sun just dipping behind the ridge like no time had passed. And Caleb was gone, no sign of him, no cooler, no tracks, and when I looked down, my boots were clean, no mud, no blood, just dust from the road. And for a heartbeat I thought maybe it was over, maybe I had dreamed the whole thing. But when I touched my chest, I felt the fire still burning deep, the whispers still curling at the edges of my mini. Don't know how I made it out, maybe the mountain let me, maybe it wanted me to carry the story back down to the rest of you, and I don't know if I'm still me, or if I'm just another one of those faces waiting in the bark in the water and the fire circles. But I can tell you this, the trail is real, the mountain is real. If you ever find yourself near the lot at dusk with the air too still, and the trees leaning too close, you'll hear it too, the whisper under your skin calling you by name, and if you follow it, if you take one step onto